let's continue with our discussion of nausea, in particular the notion of having an adventure. You might remember a topic that's introduced by the self-taught man asking our soul if he's had many adventures, and his first response, and it's clear that the self-taught man has a sense of the common unreflected notion of an adventure. It's got to do with something with you that's usually out of the ordinary, often involves danger, or the related notion often involves some sort of challenge overcome, and difficulties passed. Working with this common sense notion of adventure, and so realizes that his life, of course, that he's extremely adventurous. He thinks about it, and starts to get uneasy about his answer, and through considering the question, the concept of adventure itself is relevant here. And he says on page 36, "No, I haven't had the adventures. I fill my pipe, lit it, stretched out on the bed, throwing the coat over my legs, etc., etc. First, it seems to me a pure question of words. In other words, depending on what you mean by adventure, I didn't have adventures like enough." But then he starts to say, he moves past the point that there are a plurality of ways of conceiving of adventure, and to the further point that of these plurality of ways, there's some that are wrong, or the usual one is wrong, and another one that's the correct notion of adventure, at least notion of adventure in the most interesting, important sense. And in that sense, he thinks he hasn't had any adventures. This first, it seems to be a pure question of words. The business of Mechanist, for example, I was thinking about a little while ago. A Moroccan jumped on me and wanted to stab me with an enormous knife, but I hit him just below the temple. Then he began shouting in Arabic, and a swarm of lousy beggars came up and chased us all the way to the Souk at-Ta'am. Well, you can call that any name you like. In any case, it was an event which happens to me. And again, as I pointed out last time, happens is italicized. Then he says, I've never had adventures. Things happen to me. No adventure. It isn't a question of words. Why not? What he had in mind by adventure was this. I'd imagined at certain times in my life to take on a rare and precious quality. And it doesn't say what it is here. Rare and precious quality. This is not true now, but in the old days, and he mentions these sort of romantic venues, London, Mechanist, Tokyo, I've known great moments, I've had adventures. This is what he thought. Now I am deprived of this. It is the notion that he's had adventures, the notion that his life has taken off this as yet unnamed rare and precious quality, is now an idea that he thinks isn't right. Of course, we have to find out what the rare and precious quality is in order to follow his thinking on this and decide whether we agree with it or not. He said, he says the beginning would have had to be real beginnings. Notice he's using this subjunctive here. Would have had to be. Not as a counterfactual. Would have had to be real beginnings. Alas, I see so clearly what I wanted. He sees what he had wanted to have in his life, which would have made those events rare and precious and made them adventures in this deep sense. Real beginnings are like the fanfare of trumpets. Notice it's back to music. Like the first notes of a jazz tune, directly back to the scene in a cafe. Cutting short tedium, making for continuity. Then you say about these evenings within evenings, I was out for a walk. It was It's an evening in May, you walk, the moon has just risen, you feel hazy, vacant, a little empty, and suddenly you think, something is happening. Something is happening. No matter what, a slight rustling in the shadow, a thin silhouette crossing the street, but this paltry event, notice, this paltry event, it's not like the others. Suddenly you see that it's the beginning of a great shape whose outlines are lost in mist, and you tell yourself, something is beginning. Something is beginning in order to end. Adventure does not let itself be drawn out. It only makes sense when it's dead. I am drawn irrevocably toward this death, which is perhaps mine as well. Each instant appears only as part of a sequence. I cling to each instant with all my heart. I know that it is unique, irreplaceable, and yet I would not raise a finger to stop it from being annihilated. What does this remind you of? It speaks about annihilation. Where have you heard that before? The musical notes, he says, you listen to music as much as you like it. You can't, you hear this little phrase, by the very nature of the musical phrase, it's only beautiful because it lasts as long as it does and no longer. Wouldn't it be better if all the notes lasted twice as long, right? They were tedious. The beauty of the music has to do with when it ends and when it begins, and the fact that it doesn't go on forever, as much as you love it. He loves some of these days. Part of loving it is that it's got a certain span. Each note has a certain length, and no more. Okay. So with respect to music, that is, the musical piece as a whole and its parts, part of what makes it great is that it ends when it does. It lasts just as long as it does. So with respect to a chunk of your life, which is obviously going to be like the music, it's going to have a real beginning, a real end, and everything is going to be seen as a sequence from that beginning to that end. It's going to have the same quality that the music has. In other words, these rare and precious moments that it's talked about are adventures because they have some of the same structural qualities that the music has. So the music and the notion of adventure run, obviously, parallel. He says, this last moment I'm spending in Berlin, in London, in the arms of a woman casually met 2 days ago. A moment I love passionately. Woman I may adore. All this is going to end. I know it. Soon I shall leave for another country. I shall never rediscover either this woman or this night. I grasp at each second, trying to suck it dry. Nothing happens which I do not seize, which I do not fix forever in myself. Nothing, neither the fugitive tenderness of those lovely eyes, nor the noises of the street, nor the false dawn of early morning. And even so, the minute passes, and I do not hold it back. I like to see it pass. I like to see it pass. As much as I love it, I like to see it pass because it's lovable and lovely because it passes the way it does. He says, but an adventure never returns, nor is prolonged. And then he says something that is going to, and he says, following this gold spot with my eyes, think of these adventures, I think I would accept even if I had to risk death, lose a fortune, friends, to live it all over again in the same circumstances from end to end. But an adventure never returns nor is prolonged. Adventure never returns nor is prolonged. There is this saying, it's from Nietzsche uses it, but it may not be original. He says, everything that's painful wants to be done away with, but all joy wants eternity. All joy wants eternity. I would like to have that adventure again. It was great, but there's a sense in which it would have to return. You can't just prolong it, then it wouldn't be good. You have to return. Just the way you might want to hear the music again, but you don't want the music to go on for 2 months without stopping to drive you crazy. But he says, adventures do not return. Adventures do not return. Something similar may happen, but you can't relive the same thing all at once. And then he says, he loves the song that the deeply sings. What I wouldn't give, he says, if my life were to be made the subject of melody. This is an important sentence. He would like his life to be like the music. He has imagined that his life has been like the music at times. Now, notice another thing that's introduced here without fanfare. It's very interesting. When he's talking about what gives you that, notice he says it's a paltry event, a rustling of leaves. Suddenly, we're not talking about being in some romantic place like Mechanus. We're not talking about facing danger, as he did there. We're not talking about overcoming difficulty, as he did there. We're talking about a paltry event. Right? So we get this idea that maybe, he's going to come back to this and make it more explicit, what makes this segment of your life so wonderful, makes it an adventure, has nothing to do with the usual criterion for adventure. Walking somewhere, the moon rises, and the leaves rustle, and you have a feeling something began. Paltry event. It's not a fight, it's not a love affair. The leaves rustle. You have this feeling that something is beginning, that suddenly your experience is going to have the structural togetherness that the music has. And that is what he's suggesting is what makes an adventure. And that is, he's also suggesting, when he denies that you can have adventures, denies that that can ever really happen to you. And of course, you can think it's happening to you, or you can think it's happening to you, but it can't really happen to you, and he's going to try to explain why that's the case. He says, yes, is that what you wanted? Namely, that your life would be made the subject of a melody. He was really saying, my life at times would be like a melody. Not quite the same. He says, well, that's exactly what you've never had. That's exactly what you've never had. Remember, you fooled yourself with words. You called the glitter of travel, of love of women, quarrels, and trinkets, adventure. And this, not the trinkets and the women who travel, but this quality, this is what you'll never have, and no one other than yourself. That is, it's not that you, no one has adventures. It's a general philosophical truth about the experiences of life. None of them are like adventures. None of them are adventures. And then he says, why not?